Welcome to OCIA Book Club. My name is Rosie Hernandez. I'm Director of Formation and Evangelization, and I'm reading and breaking down each part of the newly translated Order of Christian Initiation of Adults, reviewing the content and the important elements just for you. And today is an exciting day because we're going to be looking at the Rite of Entrance to the Catechumenate from numbers 48 through 67. Which is a huge chunk of the actual rite. So we're going to look at what specifically the rite tells us to do. So let's start with the name change. Sorry. So the old translation had this as the rite of acceptance, but when we received this translation last year, we saw the new name of this rite is the Rite of Entrance into the Catechumenate, which is very nice because it's very specific to what it is and what it means. That at this point, the inquirers are now going to become catechumens as they enter the catechumenate. And just note that the catechumenate is an order, an official order of the church. So it is a big deal. And just like in the last session, we talked about how it does say that the inquiry and this should not be skipped. These are important parts of the process as they're what help them move forward and kind of recognize their new name and their new place in the church as catechumens. So let's get started. It starts out with a rite of introduction as we begin Mass. This is right at the beginning of Mass or whatever celebration you're having this, but usually it's at Sunday Mass. And it starts with number 48, talking about the ones that are going to be coming in. So first, the inquirers and their sponsors and the team, and even you can invite some representatives of the church to be outside. And we welcome them outside. Now, I know there's a long-standing tradition of having them outside, knocking on the door, and then this whole dialogue takes place at the doorway, and then we invite them in. But in actuality, that's something we kind of put in our own, the knocking on the door. That's something we initiated as a tradition, and it's not really part of the rite. So the rite, I'm not going to tell you that's wrong, okay? If that's your parish tradition and that's what your people are used to and you want to continue that, then that's going to be a pastoral decision. But what the rite actually says is that those entering the catechumenate, together with their sponsors and a group of the faithful, gather outside the church or in the vestibule or at the entrance or some other suitable part of the church. And then the priest or deacon goes out to meet them, and the faithful sing if appropriate. And then 49 tells us what the priest does when he gets out there. The celebrant greets them, welcomes them, and then invites them to come forward. And then they take their place wherever it is that this is going to happen. And so it's more of a going out to meet them and bringing them in. That's a hospitality move. So the knocking outside is a symbolism that they're wanting to be a part of the Catholic Church and come in. And so we open the door and we let them in. That's one symbol of hospitality. But if you think about the prodigal son, and if you think about Abraham when he greets the three strangers that come to his tent, he doesn't wait inside the door for them to knock. They both run out. They run out to meet the person or the people and then bring them in. The prodigal son, the father bringing in the prodigal son, and Abraham bringing in the strangers. And so that whole act of hospitality, of going to the door, not just because they knocked, but because we want them to be a part of us, and then bringing them in, is a very strong symbol. So it's something to think about. Again, I'm not going to say you should do it this way, you shouldn't do it this way. I'm just teaching what the book says. But if you have a tradition that works for you and you don't want to change that and your pastors want to change that, that's a pastoral decision. But here in the book, this is what it explains. Then as they come forward and take their place, it's encouraged that you use Psalm 63, "You are my God, for you I pine," or some version of that, or something connected to that. And then we have the dialogue where the celebrant asks them the questions, the big questions. What's your name? What do you ask of God's church? And they answer, faith. And you ask, what does faith offer you? Eternal life. So that's the answers that are given. However, in paragraph 50b, it does say that you may use other words in asking them about their intentions and permit them to reply in their own words. Because maybe I, as a inquirer just coming into this, I'm not quite sure about faith, but I know what I'm looking for is community. Or maybe I've just had a crazy life and I'm looking for God to bring some peace to me. And so when they ask, what do you ask of God's church? My answer might be peace, peace of heart and peace of mind. Or it might be acceptance because I feel lost and alone. Or it might be, so everybody's answer is going to be different. And so if you're able, if you don't have 30 people, if you only have, especially if you only have like 3 or 4 or 6, 7, something like that, it doesn't take that long to go to each one and ask them, what do you ask of God's church? One word. What will this bring you? And then maybe they can say a sentence. So you say, what do you ask of God's church? Peace. What will peace give you? A calmness of heart so that I can focus on my relationship with God. Very simple. Now, in order to do that, you have to prepare them ahead of time. So the week before, I would do a session that is all reflection and discernment, just asking them these questions. Right now in your life, if God were to standing right in front of you asking, what are you looking for specifically for your life right now? What would you answer? And then how would your life be different if you got that? What would you gain by receiving that? And then let them think about that answer, maybe talk about it with their sponsors in pairs, something so that there's preparation, and then you can do that. Now, obviously, if you have 25 catechumens, you may not be able to have the time. You got another mass coming up, and you may not be able to ask them each of these questions in the liturgy, but you might be able to do that as their discernment. So I encourage you to read number 50, paragraph B, where it talks about that, about using alternate words, about letting them answer the question for themselves at this point. Now, number 51 talks about having a rite of exorcism or renunciation of false worship. That's a special occasion option only if you have someone that, for example, has belonged to a faith tradition or a tradition of some sort that has been anti-Christian, and so they have engaged in false worship. They have a past where they're in need of that protection prayer of exorcism. That can be added, but that's with the discretion of the bishop. And so that's not something that we talk about unless you have a situation. And if you do, give me a call and I'll direct you in the right way to who to talk about. Then we go to number 52, where the celebrant is inviting them to make their initial commitment to the faith. And they answer, I am, because it's are you ready to do this? This is what you're promising. This is what you're looking for. Are you ready? And then they listen to those words. And again, you can prepare them ahead of time to figure out if you're using A, B, or C options and let them hear it and really discern so that when they're there at the Mass in front of the assembly, they're ready to say, I am ready. Same thing with the sponsors. As the sponsors are asked, are you ready? You're presenting them to us. Are you ready to support them and help prepare them? And the sponsors need to be ready to say, I am. And then he also speaks to the assembly. And again, maybe right before Mass, you can explain to the assembly, this is the rite that we're doing. Father is going to ask you if you're ready to support them with prayer. And I invite you to take a few minutes of silence to reflect on that so that when he asks you, you can, with your whole heart and spirit, respond as well. I am. So make sure everybody is prepared. Don't just let it kind of happen and hopefully everybody will say, yes, Father, because when they just do that, they don't fully understand. We need to prepare them. It's our responsibility as team to prepare them for that. So then we go on to number 54, where we have the signing of the forehead. They're invited to come forward with their sponsors, and then the sponsors can make the sign of the cross on the forehead. The celebrants can, unless they're going to do it later in the signing of the census, which most people do. You can do it right at that moment. But at the very least, the celebrant will go through and do the sign of the cross on their foreheads, as is receive the sign of the cross. Christ strengthens you, learn to know and follow him. And then the option is, which many people do, and I love it, go into the signing of all the census, which the sponsors do. Just a word of note that if the sponsors are doing this signing, again, make sure that they are aware and they understand what's happening. You also want to make sure that if you have people of different different cultural traditions, that they are okay with how their sponsor will do this. Some people in their cultural tradition are not open to being touched physically, and so the cross can be made over them without touching them. Other traditions, ethnic traditions or cultural traditions want that touching, and so they would do that. So just make sure you address that. But you go through the full signing of the senses with or without music. Music can be played in between each one. It can be played in between every three. That's what I used to do. We'll do two and then music, or three and then a refrain, and then kind of end with a little bit of a refrain that the community can sing. Then the celebrant does a prayer and then introduces them into the church. And I love the way he says that, by name, or catechumens, come into the church and gather with us for the word, for the table of the word. And so he invites them either in or to be seated and to listen to the word of God. And then we have the word. So you have your regular Sunday readings of first Sunday, Psalm, second Sunday, and gospel. After the gospel, you have the homily, and then you have the option to present to them a book of the gospels, because really what they're going to focus on as catechumens is the gospel, if you're doing liturgical catechesis. And so some parishes will give them a Bible, but in actuality it says here that you could present them with a book. It just says a book containing the gospel. So it can be a book of the gospels, or a small one, or it can be a Bible of their own. You might even want to give them a cross if that could be alternate or in addition to, just to kind of show that they are taking on now this gospel of Christ. Then you have the intercessions, which are specifically written for the catechumens. You have a concluding prayer, and then you have the dismissal. Now, in that case, if you're in Mass and you do dismiss your candidates, which you should, it's in the rite, number 68, which I didn't include, but 68 actually tells us, if the Eucharist is celebrated after dismissal, the universal prayer for the needs of the Church and the whole world begin at once. Then, if required, the Creed is said and the preparation of gift. But for pastoral reasons, it is permissible to omit the universal prayer and the creed. So what you could do is they give you the option of, let's see, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petitions that are specifically for the catechumens. If you wanted to, you could just do 4 for the catechumens, 1 for the church, and then 1 for the needs of the parish, which includes those who are sick, those who have died, and the intention of the Mass. And then after the dismissal, if there's not a creed required on that specific Sunday, you could go right into the presentation of the gifts, and all of this takes the place of the creed. So it just depends on what Sunday you're on and what it is that your pastor wishes to do. We don't do it just for time's sake. It's not like, oh, let's do this shorter and cut the creed. It's more that what we now are attesting to through these catechumens can take the place of the creed and the petitions, if you include petitions of the parish with those of the catechumens. And so that just gives you a bit of an option of how to do the rite of acceptance. So thanks for being with me through this journey, and hopefully you'll join me for episode 5, already at 5, where we'll begin to talk through the time of a catechumenate.